After listening to the slaver's sales pitch, Eton interrupted him by holding out his hand to let me see what you have, what he demanded. As usual, slavers were very obedient when it came to dealing with gone nobles. The slaver bowed and said, "As you wish, Lord Eton," grinning. He still wasn't used to being called Lord. He had only recently reached adulthood and inherited all of his late sire's land and property. His maternal grandsire had managed his lands after his sire passed away and raised Eton with all the skills a noble needed, but humility wasn't one of those abilities. He was frequently high to those he considered to be particularly inferior to him, viewing Nan as being beneath him. After all, he was a Gookan noble, and only the royal family was above them. For the Goans, rank was food and drink. Those who possessed it showed it off, while those who didn't tried to acquire it. Eton's father had risen to his position due to his skill and outstanding service to the king, and Eton believed that these same skills had been inherited by him after the gods had prioritized the nobles over everyone else. Along with his Morris steward and Rick bodyguards, he sat here unwilling to acknowledge that he was in over his head. He discussed with his steward which slaves would be most useful from the selection of the usual enslaved species, while his steward negotiated prices. One of his first needs was to demonstrate his power by hiring new slaves to work his lands. After all, what good is a title if you can't show it off over others? Eton glanced around the ship casually when he noticed another slave inside. Its arms and legs were shaken, even though it was already in a cage, and he couldn't see its face because of the hood over his head. He asked the slaver, "Why isn't that one being presented, Lord?" The slaver replied, "You mean the human? He's bound for the mines in the Darari sector. Humans are too dangerous to serve in any other capacity, especially this one. I've never heard of a human before." Eton continued to bring him forth, "But Lord, the human is not worthy of now." Eton interrupted. The slaver bowed his head and signaled to two of his goons, who took the stun batons from their belts. One of them went to the cage, unlocked it, and opened the door. He pulled on the shackles to get the slave moving, but one of them remained just out of reach. The leg shackles went slowly at first, but eventually they had him standing before Eton removed his hood. When the slaver complied, it became clear that the slave was also wearing a gag. Why was he gagged? Does he have big fangs or something? Eton asked. "No, my lord. He's just really annoying and disrespectful." When the slaver turned to face his steward, he said, "Have you heard of these humans before?" "No, my lord," the steward replied, before turning to face the slaver. "Where are these humans from? What system?" "K for systems in the Draic sector," the steward demanded. "The humans call it Sol. Since the Zarin are low-tech and haven't even left their system, it's hardly strange that you've never seen one. However, they have been known to kidnap human beings for research or experimentation. Unsatisfactory specimens are then sold into slavery or into the fighting pits." The mention of the fighting pits made Eton sit up. He loved them and thought he would be a true expert in the martial arts practiced there. If he had a fighter of his own, he could become famous. "How do they perform in the matches?" Eton asked. "If they receive any kind of training, they are above average." The slaver went on to say that because their planet has a higher gravity than average, they are stronger than most. Humans aren't as strong as Tan's Rick bodyguards, but they are superior to everyone else. However, the two Vaso slaves are intelligent, especially considering how backward his people are, but they can't match your Morris steward, and their endurance is about average compared to most pit fighters. All things considered, humans are just average pit fighters, which makes them particularly dangerous. "What do you mean by that?" the slaver questioned, looking perplexed. "They don't rely solely on one ability but on all of theirs at the same time," the slaver said, adding that since this one was one of their warriors when they seized him, he is even more deadly. After the formalities of payment and ownership transfer were completed, the Rick led the slaves away. The hood was replaced on the human, but his leg shackles were removed. Otherwise, it would take all day to get him to the slave pens. The steward approached Eton and said, "My lord, is it wise to have someone that dangerous on the estate?" Eton laughed. "He won't be on the estate for long. I'm going to send him to fight in the pits." The steward grinned at that brilliant notion. Eton was arrogant as he followed up, saying, "You heard the slaver, but he's not as strong as my guards nor can he outsmart you, and I am more than clever enough to handle him." It was in the middle of the night when he was awakened by a sound, and he was annoyed to have his sleep disturbed. He didn't know what it was, but he thought it was a loud thump. He got up and put on his robe, muttering to himself about the punishments the offender would receive. When he reached the door, he opened the slot that led him into the hallway, but he could hardly see the 2 ratry guards that flanked the door. "What was that noise?" he demanded, but neither guard responded. I shouted, "Answer me or I'll send you to the pits," as Eton closed the slot and opened the door. He turned to face the guards as he left the room, and it dawned on him that they would never respond. Both guards were gruesomely dead with their throats slit and blood all over the walls and the floor. It still dribbled down from the wound and down their chests to pull at their feet in his shocked state. It took him a moment to wonder how they were still standing. That is when he noticed the thin but strong wire wrapped around their necks. The wire cut deeply into their flesh, and Eton followed it up to the access hatch in the ceiling. His head whipped around as he looked for danger. Then he went back into his room, slammed the door, and locked it. He looked around for his sidearm, but it was too dark. He flipped the switch for the light, and that is when he saw the steward's head. It was impaled on one of the bedposts. He started to back towards the door when he came up against something solid. He felt another being's breath on his neck and a hand pulling his head back. "You should have listened to the slaver," was spoken into his ear before he felt a sharp line of fire across his neck and he struggled to breathe, and then he slipped into darkness. The story is now complete. If you liked it, please like it, subscribe to our channel, and let us know what other HFY stories you would want to see us tell next. Thank you for your time.